The thing that should have never happened. The galaxy had learned many rules the hard way. Some were written in treaties, some in blood, and one of the oldest, carved into every military academy across 17 species, was brutally simple. Do not provoke the Drakshan brood. Not the warriors. Not the queens. Not even the elders. But especially, not the cubs. Because a Drakshan cub was not a child in any comforting sense. It was a future catastrophe with teeth. And yet, somewhere beyond the edge of civilized space, on a dead mining rock designated Chorus 9, humanity broke that rule without even realizing it was a rule. At first, the distress signal came through cracked and half-drowned in static. Union Channel 44, classified abandoned zone. Survivor, repeat, survivor detected, life sign unstable. Most captains would have ignored it. The system was marked dead for a reason. Every survey team sent there had either vanished or come back speaking in fragments, and refusing psychiatric debriefs. Chorus 9 wasn't just dangerous. It was wrong. Captain Rel of the Varelian Salvage Guild stared at the signal like it was a personal insult. No life remains there, he said flatly. Only reclamation rights and legal liability. The bridge crew agreed. Everyone agreed. Except the human. Chief Engineer Mara Vance leaned against the console, chewing something aggressively that might have once been tobacco. Then why is it still calling for help? She asked. Rel's crest feathers tightened. Because automated systems degrade. Echo loops occur. Ghost signals are common in. Mara cut him off with a lazy hand wave. Yeah? Space ghosts. Sure. She stepped closer to the display. The signal flickered again, weak, fractured, but intentional. Someone was still pushing it out. That mattered. To her anyway. You're not seriously considering a landing, Rel said. Mara smiled faintly. I am seriously considering finding out who's stupid enough to still be alive down there. That statement, in hindsight, would later be classified as human doctrine. Rel tried again. The Drakshan infestation was never fully purged. The planet is full of monsters, yeah, Mara said. I read the brochure. No one had a good answer to that. Because there wasn't a brochure. Just warnings. And silence. And bodies that never made it back. Still, she suited up. Not in military armor. Just an old environmental rig patched so many times it looked like it had survived 3 different owners and possibly an explosion out of spite. The crew watched her prep with the uneasy respect one gives to someone who refuses to understand danger in the correct emotional register. You're not a soldier, Rel said quietly as she moved toward the drop shuttle. Mara stopped at the hatch. No, she said. I'm worse. The hatch closed. And she dropped. Chorus 9 greeted her like it had been waiting. The atmosphere was heavy, thick with mineral dust and something else that tasted metallic even through filters. The sky was a dull smear of ash-colored storm bands that never stopped moving. The landing zone was a ruin. Mining towers collapsed inward like broken ribs. Cargo rigs gutted from the inside out. The ground itself looked chewed. And there was silence. The kind of silence that wasn't absence of sound. It was the presence of something waiting to hear you make a mistake. Mara stepped out of the shuttle anyway. Her boots hit ash. The comlink crackled instantly. Engineer Vance? Rel's voice said, tight with static. Status report. Breathing, she replied. That is not what I asked. Still counts as status. She moved forward. The distress signal grew stronger the deeper she walked into the wreckage field. It wasn't coming from a beacon. It was coming from something handheld. Personal. Someone had survived long enough to ask for help repeatedly in a place that did not allow asking. That alone made her curious. Then she heard it. A sound beneath the wind. Not mechanical. Not alien speech. Something smaller. A broken, desperate whine. Mara slowed. That's new, she muttered. She followed it past the collapsed transport frame twisted like a snapped spine, past half-buried containers still leaking frozen fuel, past bone fragments that didn't match anything in Union databases. Then she saw it. The cub. At first, her brain tried to categorize it. Failed. It was too wrong for instinct, too engineered for nature. Black-red chitinous skin that shifted slightly as it breathed. Multiple jointed limbs tucked too tightly under itself. A head too angular to be considered biological comfort. Eyes like molten glass trying to remember what empathy was supposed to feel like. A Draxon predator cub. Pinned under a collapsed beam. Bleeding a faint neon green fluid that hissed where it touched dust. It wasn't roaring. It wasn't hunting. It was trapped. And it was making that sound again. That small, broken noise. Mara crouched slowly. Okay, she said quietly. So you're the reason for the signal. The cub lifted its head. And for one brief second she saw it clearly. Not monster. Not weapon. Just terrified animal. Then it moved. Fast. Instinct snapped like a trap spring. The beam exploded upward as it forced itself free, launching straight at her throat with enough speed to turn bone into dust. Any trained soldier would have fired. Any rational species would have fled. Mara Vance did neither. She stepped forward. And caught it. Midair. One arm locked under its chest. The other bracing its neck ridge as it thrashed violently, claws scraping against her suit plating with sparks of resistance. For a moment, everything stopped. Wind. Dust. Time. Even the distant static of the comms seemed to hesitate. Then Mara exhaled. And laughed. Well, she said, adjusting her grip slightly as the creature twisted uselessly in the air. That's one hell of a greeting. The cub snarled. She spun once. Slow. Deliberate. Like she was testing balance more than survival. The Draxon cub went from lethal strike to confused airborne passenger in a single rotation. It made a sound. Not a roar. Not a screech. A confused, high-pitched yelp. Mara stopped spinning. Looked at it. Raised an eyebrow. Oh no, she said. Don't you do that. You don't get to be terrifying and adorable at the same time. That's not fair marketing. The cub bit her arm. Hard. The suit held. Barely. Mara stared at it for a long moment. Then flicked its nose. Rude. And that's when the forest started moving. Not wind. Not debris. Movement with intent. Eyes began appearing in the fog. 1. 10. Hundreds. Then more. The cub went still. Not calm. Not safe. Recognizing. Terrified. And then Mara heard it too. A distant sound rising from every direction at once. Answering calls? Pack calls. Hunting calls. The cub wasn't lost. It had been taken. And whatever had taken it had just realized. It was not alone anymore. Mara slowly turned her head toward the fog. Oh, she said softly. That's going to be a problem. And in the shifting ash, something massive stepped forward. Watching her. Deciding. Hungry. The cub in her arms began shaking again. Not struggling now. Begging. And Mara tightened her grip slightly. Yeah, she muttered. I was afraid of that. The forest answered with a roar. And the pack began to charge. The laugh heard in a kill zone. The first impact didn't come as a warning. It came as a decision. A Draxon Alpha burst through the fog like a living siege weapon, its limbs carving trenches through basalt ash, its jaws opening wide enough to swallow a shuttle cockpit whole. The air itself seemed to recoil as it charged, as if reality had some basic instinct for self-preservation. Behind it, more movement. Not one predator. A formation. A coordinated pack. Military behavior. Hunting doctrine. Mara Vance tightened her grip on the cub instinctively. It trembled harder now. Not from injury. From recognition. They're yours, she muttered under her breath, eyes locked on the incoming wall of teeth and shadow. And they're not happy I borrowed you. Captain Rel's voice crackled in her ear. Vance, extraction is no longer optional. Repeat, This is a full predator convergence event. You will be overrun in under. Yeah, she interrupted, rolling her shoulders. I can see them. The Alpha roared. The sound hit like a physical force, vibrating through the ground, through bone, through thought. Smaller creatures in the distance scattered or went still, as if the world itself was choosing sides. Then the pack moved. All at once. A wave of engineered violence. Mara exhaled slowly. All right, she said. Let's see what you've got. And she put the cub down. For half a second, the battlefield paused. Even the charging Drakshan hesitated. The cub landed unsteadily on the ash. Confused. Exposed. Mara stepped forward, placing herself directly between it and the oncoming death wave. Bad news, she said casually, as if addressing a malfunctioning machine. I think I just became emotionally invested. The Alpha screamed. And lunged. Mara moved. Not backward. Forward. The collision was not elegant. It was physics refusing to be polite. Her fist met the creature's snout mid-charge with enough force to detonate dust in a radial shockwave. The Alpha's head snapped sideways violently, its body skidding across the ground like a broken projectile before crashing into a collapsed mining strut. Silence followed. Then the pack roared. Not confusion. Not fear. Anger. Recognition of resistance. Mara flexed her hand once, shaking off the impact. Okay, she said, rolling her neck. We're doing it the hard way. She reached down and unclipped her plasma cutter. The hum that followed changed the atmosphere immediately. Energy stabilized into a bright, angry line of blue-white light. Even the Drakshan pack slowed slightly. Predators understood tools. But they didn't understand confidence. And Mara Vance was radiating something dangerously close to boredom. The Alpha recovered. It didn't retreat. It adapted. It circled once. Then the pack split. Flanking pattern. Coordinated assault geometry. Military instinct. Mara tilted her head. Well, she said softly, almost amused. Somebody taught you manners. The first flanker hit from the left. She stepped inside its reach, grabbed its limb mid-strike, and used its momentum to slam it into a second attacker arriving from behind. Both bodies collided with a wet, cracking impact that sent fragments of chitin spinning into the fog. A third came from above. She didn't even look up. Just raised the plasma cutter. The blade flashed. The creature dropped in two clean halves, hitting the ground before its brain fully registered it had lost the argument. The cub watched. Frozen. Uncomprehending. Because nothing in its short, violent existence had ever shown it this. A single being treating apex predators like structural inconveniences. Another charge came. Mara pivoted, hooked an arm under its jaw, and threw it. Not pushed. Not redirected. Thrown. It hit the ground hard enough to carve a shallow crater. Come on, she called out, voice carrying across the field. You can do better than that. I've seen training drones with more enthusiasm. The Alpha snarled again. And this time, it changed. The pack tightened formation. No more scattered attacks. Synchronized strike pattern. 4 angles. 1 kill window. Mara saw it immediately. Her expression shifted slightly. Not fear. Interest. Well, she said quietly. There it is. The synchronized charge hit. All 4 bodies converged at once. For the first time, Mara didn't move forward. She waited. At the exact last possible moment. She dropped. Rolled. The attack passed over her like a collapsing ceiling. And she came up behind them. Plasma cutter ignited fully. The air screamed. 2 seconds later, the formation was no longer a formation. It was debris. The fog filled with fallen shapes. The ground smoked. The silence that followed was heavier than before. Captain Rel had stopped speaking. Even he understood now that this was no longer a rescue operation. It was something else. Mara stood slowly, breathing steady. A thin line of blood ran down her arm where one of the claws had finally managed to connect. She glanced at it. Then back at the pack remnants. Huh, she said. Almost respectable. The Alpha was still alive. Barely. Dragging itself upright, shaking, fury burning through pain pathways that refused to shut down. It locked eyes with her. And then, the cub ran. Not away. Toward her. It slammed into her leg. Small body shaking violently, pressing itself against her, as if she had become the only stable object left in the universe. The Alpha froze. The entire battlefield froze with it. Mara looked down at the cub. Then at the Alpha. Then sighed. Oh, she said. So that's what this is. Her tone changed slightly. Less amused. More understanding. You didn't lose it, she continued quietly. You were using it. The Alpha snarled weakly. But there was hesitation now. Because the cub had chosen. Mara reached down. Picked the cub up again. It didn't resist. Didn't bite. Didn't fight. Just clung. And then she smiled. Not kindly. Not gently. Something sharper. Bad parenting, she said. I get that. She raised the plasma cutter slightly. The Alpha tensed, waiting for the kill. But Mara didn't fire. Instead, she tilted her head. Here's the thing, she said. On my world, we don't like seeing kids used as bait. A pause. Then she added, almost conversationally. And we really don't like repeat offenders. The fog behind her shifted. Because something else had just landed. Heavy. Deliberate. Human. Captain Rel's voice returned, but it was different now. Lower. Controlled. Vance, he said, we are no longer classifying this as salvage. A pause. Then, we are classifying it as first contact. Mara didn't look back. She kept her eyes on the Alpha. And smiled faintly. Yeah, she said. I was starting to think you'd finally notice. The plasma cutter brightened. And the battlefield, for the first time since her arrival, felt like it was about to learn what humanity did when it stopped being surprised. First contact was a mistake nobody survived to correct. The shuttle didn't land gently. It asserted dominance. Thrusters burned through the ash fog, carving a clean circle of scorched ground as it touched down behind Mara Vance like a metal god deciding to interrupt a local argument. The ramp dropped. And the humans came out. Not soldiers in ceremonial unity. Not diplomats. Not even clean-faced explorers. Salvage crews. Gunmetal suits patched with weld scars and emergency plating. Faces that looked like they had already survived the worst version of this conversation and came back to argue about it anyway. Captain Rel was among them. But something had changed in him. The hesitation was gone. Replaced by a very quiet, very dangerous stillness. He looked at the field first. Then the bodies. Then the Alpha still barely alive, trembling in rage and disbelief. Then the cub in Mara's arms. And finally, Mara herself. Covered in dust. Blood on her sleeve. Plasma cutter still humming like it wanted permission to finish the sentence. Rel exhaled slowly. This, he said, voice low, was not on the briefing. Mara didn't turn. Yeah, she replied. Neither was the part where they use kids as live bait. That got a shift. Even among hardened crews. Because everyone understood what that meant. One of the engineers whispered. They bred it? Mara finally glanced back. Doesn't matter. It's happening. The cub shifted slightly in her grip. Not afraid anymore. Confused. Attached. Alive. And that alone was enough to make the entire landing crew uneasy. Because Drakshan cubs did not attach. They imprinted. And imprinting meant ownership. Rel stepped forward slowly. Vance, he said carefully, you are holding a classified apex life form currently listed under Union extinction containment protocols. Mara nodded. Yeah, I read the label. That is not a pet. Didn't say it was. It is a war asset. Mara finally looked at him directly. And smiled. That was worse. Then your paperwork is wrong, she said. A silence dropped so fast it felt like gravity increased. Behind them, the Alpha attempted to rise again. It failed. One of the crew raised a weapon automatically. Rel stopped them with a hand. No, he said quietly. Not yet. The Alpha hissed weakly. Rel walked closer. Not afraid. Measuring. Assessing. The creature recognized him as leadership adjacent. And hated it. Mara watched this carefully. You noticing something? She asked. Rel didn't answer immediately. Then, they're organized, he said. Yeah, Mara replied. That's usually how packs work. No, Rel said. Not like this. That wasn't animal coordination. He gestured at the field, the attack patterns, the flanking, the timing. Military structure, he said. Or something close enough to be indistinguishable. The word hung there. Military. On a dead mining world. Mara glanced at the cub again. It blinked at her. Small. Confused. Alive. Or, she said slowly, someone trained them. That got attention. Full attention. One of the crew swore under their breath. That's impossible. Rel didn't look away from the Alpha. Nothing about Chorus 9 was supposed to still be alive, he said. The Alpha suddenly convulsed. Not from injury. From rage. It pushed itself up one last time, shaking violently, locking eyes with the cub in Mara's arms. And then, it spoke. Not language. Not words. A sound. Low-frequency modulation layered with biological resonance. A signal. The cub reacted instantly. It jerked in Mara's arms. Answered. A chirp-like response, soft and instinctive. The entire crew froze. Mara blinked once. Oh, she said slowly. That's new. Rel's voice dropped. Translation systems, now? One of the texts scrambled. Static filled the air. Then fragments came through. Broken phrases. Encoded intent. Return asset breach protocol. The cub responded again. Mara felt it this time. Not sound. Emotion. Fear. Confusion. Recognition. And underneath it, ownership. The tech's face went pale. They didn't lose it, he whispered. They were retrieving it. Rel's eyes narrowed. Retrieve from what? A pause. Then the translation system stabilized. And the Alpha's final message came through in fractured clarity. Human contact detected. Quarantine breach. Containment experiment compromised. Silence. Heavy. Wrong. Mara slowly looked down at the cub. Then at the Alpha. Then at Rel. Experiment? She repeated. Rel didn't answer immediately. Because now the implication was unavoidable. Chorus 9 wasn't abandoned. It was sealed. The crew had thought they were salvaging a dead mining world. They had actually walked into a controlled ecosystem. A test environment. And something had escaped its cage. The cub shifted again. This time, it didn't feel like fear. It felt like memory. Mara's grip tightened slightly. Okay, she said quietly. So who built the cage? No one answered. Because they were already hearing the second problem forming in the distance. Far beyond the fog. Beyond the dead mines. Something else was moving. Much larger. Much more organized. And it was responding to the failed retrieval signal. Rel finally spoke. We need extraction, he said. Now. Mara looked toward the horizon. Then down at the cub. Then back at the approaching threat. And for the first time since landing, her expression shifted. Not fear. Not panic. Something older. War recognition. Yeah, she said softly. About that. She tightened her grip on the plasma cutter again. I think we just escalated. The fog split in the distance. And something answered. Something that had been waiting a long time to see what broke its containment. The galaxy learned why humans don't open cages. The horizon didn't light up. It unfolded. At first, the crew thought it was a storm front, another Chorus 9 atmospheric anomaly rolling in like everything else on that cursed rock. Then the shapes resolved. Not weather. Not geology. Formation. Hundreds of them. No, thousands. Drakshon units moving in disciplined synchronization across the broken terrain like a living army that had decided gravity was optional and survival was mandatory. But these were not the chaotic predators they had just fought. These were armored. Modified. Structured. Some carried biomechanical harnesses fused into their chitin frames. Others had emitter nodes pulsing along their spines like tactical uplinks. And at the center, something worse. Something that made even Captain Rel stop breathing for half a second. A command organism. Massive. Stationary. Buried partially in a mobile bioplatform that looked less like a creature and more like a mobile war doctrine given flesh. The cub in Mara's arms went rigid. Then began shaking again. But this time, not toward fear. Toward recognition. Mara noticed immediately. "That's your parent system," she said quietly. The cub made a broken sound. Not agreement. Not denial. Conditioning. Rel stepped beside her, voice controlled in a way that meant it was very close to breaking. "Vance," he said, "put it down." Mara didn't move. "Not a chance. That is a command-linked specimen," he said sharply. "You are holding a potential neuro-relay node for a hostile containment intelligence." Mara finally looked at him. And her expression was flat. "You mean it's a child?" she said. A pause. Even Rel hesitated on that one. Because now the data didn't matter as much as the optics. The cub shifted closer to her chest instinctively. And that alone ruined any clean military interpretation of the situation. The command organism in the distance reacted. The entire field shifted in unison. The Drakshon army stopped. Not attacking. Waiting. Listening. Rel's voice dropped. "They're sinking." Mara exhaled slowly. "Yeah," she said. "I noticed." The cub chirped again. This time louder. And the response came instantly from the army. A wave of sound, not noise, but coordinated biological communication that rippled through the ground like pressure changes in a planet-sized lung. The implication hit everyone at once. This wasn't just a pack. It wasn't even a military unit. It was a distributed intelligence system. And the cub was a missing component. The command organism advanced. Slowly. Deliberately. As if confident nothing on this rock could stop it anymore. Rel raised his weapon. "Last warning," he muttered. "We cannot allow that thing to reach us." Mara didn't even look at him. "Yeah," she said. "You're not touching it. That is not negotiable." Mara finally turned fully toward him. And smiled. Not friendly. Not even humanly comforting. The kind of smile soldiers only saw right before something went very wrong for the enemy. "Captain," she said calmly, "you ever notice how every time someone says not negotiable in space?" She nodded toward the advancing army. "It becomes negotiable immediately?" The command organism surged forward. The Drakshon army moved with it. A tidal wave of engineered violence collapsing across the battlefield. This time, there would be no flanking mistakes. No hesitation. No curiosity. Just execution. Rel shouted. "Fire!" The crew opened up. Plasma, rail bursts, sonic disruptors. The first wave hit the front line. Bodies fell. Then reformed. Then adapted. They were not just soldiers. They were replaceable nodes. The army didn't stop. It didn't slow. It adjusted. Mara watched for exactly 1 second. Then sighed. "Okay," she said. "So it's that kind of day." She set the cub down. Gently. The cub immediately tried to cling back to her. She didn't let it. Instead, she crouched slightly, looked it directly in the eye, and for the first time, her voice softened. "Stay behind me," she said. The cub froze, then obeyed. That alone made Rel visibly uncomfortable. Because Drakshan did not obey. Unless something deeper had already been rewritten. Mara stood, rolled her shoulders, activated the plasma cutter fully. The blade extended, bright enough now to cast hard shadows across the ash. And then she did something nobody expected. She stepped forward, away from the crew, away from the shuttle, straight toward the advancing army. Rel shouted, "Vance!" She didn't stop. "Where are you going?" he demanded. Mara raised her voice slightly, not turning around. "Fixing your containment problem. That is not your role." She finally glanced back over her shoulder. And the grin was gone now. Replaced with something older. Something heavier. "Captain," she said quietly, "you don't get to call it containment when it's already outside the cage." Then she faced forward again. And walked into the oncoming war. The Drakshan army hit her like a collapsing mountain. And for the first time, they met something that didn't react like prey. Mara moved. Not fast. Not chaotic. Efficient. Each motion broke a structure. Each strike disrupted a coordination link. Each step forward turned formation into confusion. She wasn't fighting an army. She was dismantling a system. Behind her, the cub watched. And for the first time in its short existence, it didn't see monsters. It saw something worse. A human refusing to be categorized. The command organism changed tactics. The entire battlefield tightened. A kill net formation. Full saturation. Mara paused mid-step. Looked up at it. And laughed. Softly. Almost disappointed. "Okay," she said. "Now you're learning." She raised the plasma cutter. And drove forward into the center of the storm. The ground flashed white. The command node screamed, not in pain, but in system failure. Across the battlefield, synchronization collapsed. The army staggered. Then broke. For the first time since the landing on Chorus 9. The Drakshan were no longer one mind. They were just bodies. And bodies could be stopped. Rel stared in disbelief. "What did she just do?" someone whispered. Rel didn't answer immediately. Because he was watching Mara stand in the center of the broken formation, breathing steadily, covered in ash and light, the cub now safely behind her. And he realized something that would later be written in Union doctrine with heavy black ink. Humans did not survive first contact. They redefined it. Mara looked up at the collapsing command organism one last time. Then said, almost casually, "Next time you build a cage." She flicked the plasma blade off. "Don't leave the key in the child." Silence fell across Chorus 9. And somewhere beyond the system, the galaxy started updating its threat assessments. Too late. Far too late.